Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's a pleasure to bring you a brand new episode, which will come to you from next week, every Wednesday. The title, quite simply, is In Conversation with Lee Ryder. The premise, as it says, we'll sit down every week with our chief sports writer, Lee Ryder, and cover one topic. Now, it won't always be topical, but it will be Newcastle United related as we tap into Lee's 19 years covering the club for the Chronicle. It'll be coming to you on our audio channel and our YouTube channel too. So if you could like us and subscribe, depending on where you're coming from, that would be great. You can get in touch with me, Andrew Musgrove, on Twitter and on email at the EIBW podcast at reachplc.com. And we'd like you to suggest what topics that we cover in this mini series. Now, the first topic we're going to cover is all about Newcastle United legend. It is Nolberto Solano. But before we get into that, Lee, welcome. Are you excited for this mini series and a chance to share your insight?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a pleasure to talk about Newcastle United at any time, and certainly, looking back on great moments, and even looking at the future. There's so much to look forward to at the minute. So, any aspect of talking Newcastle is great with me.
Certainly is. And what a place to start as well with the Newcastle United legend, Nolberto Solano, a man that you know very well. The winger has just been inducted into the Newcastle United Hall of Fame. And as players who are deservingly of that accolade, especially over the last 30 years or so, I don't think anyone would argue. Nolberto Solano is right at the top of that list, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's just one of the ultimate legends for me. I think he obviously came to the club under Kenny Dalglish, and within a few weeks, Ken Dalglish had been sort of sacked. So I think that was a big surprise to him when that happened. But it didn't deter him. He continued just to keep his head down and keep working. Got accustomed to the language, got accustomed to the culture. And it's a bit like the Philippe Albert scenario, really, where he bought into the area, he bought into the city. And obviously he's back here now and he's living here. So that for me says it all. But what a player, what a technician, what a goal scorer, what an assist maker, one of the leaders in the dressing room. And as you know yourself, having done talkings with him and things like that, so fun to be around, and so friendly as well. And I think that's a big thing with Premier League footballers. Some players, they don't want to mix with the supporters and people. But Nobby Solano is not one of them. He's so accommodating whenever a fan comes his way.
Yeah, let's start there. Let's talk about the person, Alberto Solano, before we delve into his career at Newcastle United, because you are right. Some people in the position that Nobby finds himself in, as one of the legends of this great club, could be a bit standoffish. They could be getting a bit irritated, having to stop every 2 minutes or so for autographs or photographs. But Nobby just laps it up. He's got time for the fans. He always makes time, and it is wonderful to see. He's just a nice, humble guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, and I think when you actually witness that, which me and you have, you see that you're dealing with a real star then, because they do have time for the people in the media and stuff like that. And when he's in a room, he kind of becomes the center of that room. All the energy seems to direct towards him, and he deals with that so well. But it was the same on the pitch as well. I think when Newcastle had that great golden period under Sir Bobby, a lot of the goals came through Nobby Solano, and I just think, as I say, Alan Shearer, I think, got so many assists from him. But he wasn't the only one. He was just a brilliant guy on and off the field, and continues to be a great ambassador for Newcastle United.
I bumped into him on Saturday after the Luton game, and he comes over and he shakes my hand. He says, "How are you, Andrew?" And as a fan growing up watching Alberto Solano, to kind of have that moment where he recognizes you, he's remembered your name. It is, you kind of take a moment and go, "Wow!" I mean, he's just a nice, friendly guy. But you mentioned there as well. It's funny. You 100% correct. When he's in a room, everything kind of goes towards him. Yet he doesn't necessarily expect it. And I'm not going to say he feels uncomfortable at it, because he doesn't. But it's kind of like, I think sometimes he's taken aback by the fact that everyone loves Nolberto Solano and wants a bit of his time.
Absolutely, and I think last year we seen it, didn't we? We done the black and white talking at the Irish Centre, and it was a packed house, and I took him down that night to the Irish centre, and you know, there was people waiting outside for his autograph, and you know, waiting for pictures and stuff like that. People who, you know, who weren't going into the event, but you know, once you came in that room, you seen it, you heard it, the roar went up for him, and I think that just sums up what a great servant he was for the club, and as I say, continues to be that great ambassador for Newcastle United.
Yeah, so many great stories that he told on that night. And we're going to go right back to the start, Lee. As you said, signed in 1998 by Kenny Dalglish, one of Kenny's final signings for Newcastle United for just £2.5 million. He was the first Peruvian to play in the Premier League and remains the only one of any note to do so. Do you think at the time, Lee, when Newcastle signed Solano, they realised they'd be signing someone who would go the distance and become a club legend?
Well, I think Kenny Dalglish got a lot of critics during his time at Newcastle, but I think he definitely had an eye for a player, and I think he was trying to build something longer term than he got the opportunity to do, really. And if you know, he is deemed the man who broke up the entertainers almost, and you know, sold Ginola, Les Ferdinand went, I think Tino Sprilla went on his watch as well. So all these big names kind of disappeared. But if you look at the signings he did make, they all went on and had a real impact at the club. Shea Given, Nolberto Solano, Gary Speed, Andy Griffin, they all had big moments in a black and white shirt and went on, and you know, Bobby Robson inherited a strong squad, and a lot of that squad was built by Kenny. So you've got to give him a lot of credit for that. I think he must have been tipped off by somebody in South America that, you know, Nolberto Solano was a player who was capable of, let's remember, sharing a pitch with Diego Maradona, and you know, not making it difficult for Maradona to do his thing, but also taking turns with the free kicks and the set pieces and things like that. So you knew you were dealing with a player who was used to being in the limelight. I think, you know, his history in Peru, he's probably one of the most famous Peruvians. I think his wedding was televised live in Peru. I think he appeared on a stamp at one point. And yeah, it's, again, you know, we talk about him getting a good reception here. Imagine what it's like when he goes back to Lima. You know, he's treated like a god over there. But again, he's just so humble with it. And, you know, you can only imagine what he means to the people of Peru too.
Indeed. And why do you think he settled so well on Tyneside? Now, I don't know if this is the same for other clubs. I imagine it might be for some, like, say, Manchester United, perhaps. But a lot of players who aren't from Newcastle tend to come back and set up home here. You've got Malcolm McDonald as an example, and there's others who live on Tyneside once retiring, and Nobby has done that. He's gone away. He's had coaching experience. Obviously, he's gone back to his homeland for a little bit, and he's gone over other countries in Europe as well. But he's back here now. He lives here. What is it about Newcastle, and why do you think Nobby does call it home and manage to settle so well to be able to call it home?
Well, I think he's from kind of a working class background. I know, you know, his parents worked very hard to get him through sort of football and education and things like that. So I think he is, you know, he is used to hard work, and you know, he knows, especially with the Geordies, he knows that people during the week will go to work, and the big treat at the end of the week is to go and watch Newcastle United entertain them on the hallowed turf at St James's Park. And I think he never lost sight of that. But he also knew that for the fans to buy into a player, they like to see players tracking back, getting tackles in. And I think he was always a player that was prepared to do that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he kind of he chimed with a lot of people, you know. And then there's obviously the other part of it. You know, if Newcastle got a good win, I think he would happily go out and have a night on the town. And, you know, celebrate with the fans almost. But I think he also had the presence of mind. If Newcastle didn't play well, or, you know, they got beat, or they didn't do what they should have done, I think he always had a bit of a night in as well. So he knew when there was the right time to appreciate the fans, and he knew the times when not to upset them. So I think that's really important to take into consideration as well.
I'm really disappointed, Lee, there, because I thought you were going to mention the word trumpet, because everyone knows about Nobby Solano and his trumpet. It's a question he gets asked all the time, and it's kind of something that goes along with him. He tells a great story about Sir Boy Robson daring not to pick him and blowing his trumpet and annoying him in the canteen and stuff. But on the pitch, his crossing ability, Lee, was just ready-made for Alan Shearer, and United's all-time record goal scorer has said on record that Solano is the best crosser of the ball he's played with. So as compliments go, they don't get much bigger than that, do they?
No, they don't. And, I can speak at first hand. I mean, I was lucky enough. There was a few summers ago where there was a bit of a sort of all Newcastle players having playing five-a-side, and the likes of Nobby Solano was involved, Olivier Bernard, and a couple of the other young lads who were trying to get fit for pre-season, and they were short of numbers. So basically, I got drafted in to play alongside him, and it was only then that I knew he was brilliant. I knew his assists were amazing and all the things you're saying, all right. But it was only then when you actually experience a pass or a cross from a player of that caliber. We've all played Sunday League and five-a-sides and had bad teammates and people who won't pass the ball. But when you receive that service on a plate, it's like a silver service. The ball's being delivered to you on this silver platter. It stops perfectly for you, and all you've got to do is basically bundle it in the net. And then, there was times where we were playing on the bigger pitches, and these crosses that were coming in, you couldn't miss because it was so perfect. All he was saying was, just make sure you run to the front of the near post, the back post, and I'll pick you out. And I just thought, wow, I mean, that's exceptional. It's surreal to be in that situation. But also, I think that was the moment that I really appreciated the true quality of him. I knew he was great, but when you actually experience it on a pitch, at whatever level you want to call it, it was an amazing moment.
And what do you think it meant to him knowing that he had a striker like Alan Shearer to provide? You can be a great winger, but if you haven't got the marksman up front who can put the crosses in the back of the net, it all becomes a bit wasteful in many ways. But he knew he had arguably the best striker ever to grace the Premier League there, waiting and ready to put the crosses in the back of the net.
Yeah, well, Shearer, as we know, was world class, and you can put Solano in that same bracket because, I think he must have got about 80, 90 caps for Peru, played in many Copa Americas, and played against the brilliant Brazil teams, the brilliant Argentina teams. So he knew exactly what was required for a player of Alan Shearer's undoubted quality. And I think the feeling was mutual both ways, because I remember at the very start of covering Newcastle for the Chronicle, did an interview with Alan Shearer, and it was the second time that we'd signed Nobby Solano. And he basically said he was injured at the time, and I said, you're looking forward to him coming back. He says, I'm looking forward to him coming back immensely, because he'd missed him for those 2 years where he was at Aston Villa. And the service hadn't been good. Newcastle had struggled. They signed Michael Owen, yes. But Alan Shearer was sort of coming towards the end of his career. And I think he really wanted to be back on the pitch with someone who understood his game. I think if you go back to the start of Shearer's career at Newcastle, I think he got frustrated with David Ginola making runs to the front post, making runs to the back post. And then he's cutting inside and dropping, back the other way. And he's making that run for nothing, I think. And I think they did have really bad words. I think there was a few, explosive moments in the dressing room that combination just didn't gel as well as it should, because Ginola was maybe taking too many touches. But whereas Nobby Solano, I think he knew straight away, I've got Alan Shearer in the team. I need to get the ball to him in exactly the right places and make the most of him. And no surprise, they qualified for the Champions League while those two were part of the front line. So two great players together.
Yeah, great partnership. And if the stats on Transfer Market are correct, Nolberto Solano registered 78 assists in all competitions for Newcastle United 48 goals in 315 appearances. I mean, that is a massive number of assists. It'd be interesting to see that broken down and who was on the end of it. You imagine Alan Shearer was on the end of most of those crosses. And we've mentioned there the fact that he was able to defend and track back, and he put the hard work in helping his teammates out. Mentioned there the goals that he scored. I think everyone, Lee, will remember that goal against Arsenal that he scored with the outside of his foot. I watched it the other day when it was announced he was in the getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. Wonderful strike, wonderful finish, and he really did have an eye for goal.
Yeah, he did. I think there was another one against Everton as well that was a similar ilk to that one. But he knew when to, turn on the styling games as well when it was needed, when it stepped things up. I think I enjoy that Arsenal. I remember covering that game. I think it was during the time where we were still doing the pink, and I think I remember ringing the copy over for that. And it was a wonderful win against Arsenal. And I think really for Nobby, I think there were many great moments. I mean, the one that probably will stick out for me is the last gasp winner against Leeds United, and they won 4-3, and Bobby Robson was running up and down the touchline. To see that level of enthusiasm from the manager was brilliant. But that summed it up. But again, the assists, and it wasn't just the obvious assists as well. I think there was a goal against West Brom where it was a sort of indirect free kick, and he was kind of had his foot over the wall, and the wall kept moving forward, and he kept trying to catch them out. And then, just when they weren't expecting it, he kind of rolled it to Shearer, and he slammed it in. And it just little crafty moments like that on the pitch was such a big part of his career at Newcastle. He was just such a clever player, a deep thinker, someone who understood the game, and no surprise, he's gone on to have that great coaching career with Peru, getting to the World Cup, Copa America, latter stages, only losing to the likes of, I think they actually beat Brazil in one game, which is a huge result. So, a class coach as well, and able to pass on the know-how to the younger people around him.
And yeah, you're right to mention that game against Leeds. There's also a game against Derby as well, which ended in similar fashion, a late winner. And I remember him having quite a game in that one as well. But the knowledge that you mentioned there, Lee, that he can pass on, he's played with some of the world's best players. He's played for some really big clubs, not just Newcastle United. You mentioned, Maradona, of course. And it's great to see as well that he is giving back to the community with his coaching school as well, and giving the chance of youngsters here on Tyneside the chance to learn from a real master.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in years gone by, the English game hasn't produced too many players of real technical ability, compared to South America, where it's just phenomenal over there. And I think for years in the 90s, the English sort of teams were very robust, very get it up the pitch as quick as they can, and try and almost beat up teams tournaments in the 90s, and struggled badly to when they went in against a technical team, like a South American team or Holland as well. The top European teams, we just couldn't live with them because we didn't have technical ability. And to be honest, I'm from a generation where you weren't really taught technical skills. It was basically, just go out and just kick each other. Basically, that's the generation I was sort of born in. Obviously, you had your great players, but I remember going back to youth football, and in one of the first games I played, I think I tried to play a pass across the penalty area, and I just got absolutely shouted at, giving loads of stick. Don't do that. You don't pass it across your own penalty area. Whereas these days, you see now, the goalkeeper gets it and it's going back and forwards, and kids are taught that now. Whereas, back then, completely different ball game, really. And I think that's the sort of things Nolberto Solano is trying to pass on to these youngsters to be a better player and look after the ball a bit better. And I think that can only be a major thing going forward.
Yeah, indeed. And you mentioned there the fact that he left to join Aston Villa. He came back. And I remember being in the crowds watching Michael Owen being unveiled at St James's Park. We were all in the Leazes end. Lovely sunny day. And there's Michael Owen in a black and white shirt. And everyone just started chanting Nolberto Solano's name. And Freddie Shepherd then went out the next day and brought him back. And I don't know how many people were in that Leazes end. I think I've seen numbers of up to 20,000. At the stadium that day. But few players have that impact, Lee, where you have, that amount of people wanting you back, making it known on a day when you've just broken the club's transfer record. And actually, yeah, people were excited about Michael Owen, but they wanted Nolberto Solano back. That's what they wanted that day. And few players have had that impact before since Nolberto Solano.
Yeah, and the old saying football, don't go back a second time, it'll never be as good. But I think he's the exception to the rule because, when he did come back, Newcastle quickly settled down again once he got fit again. And I think in his last season, his first season back after the unveiling that you just mentioned there, he helped Newcastle get into the Intertoto Cup, which was a remarkable achievement because I think going into February they were like second bottom of the table, and they just went on this wonderful run with Glenn Roeder. He came in as caretaker manager, and I remember, he said at the time, Nobby's going to be one of my key players here, and yeah, they just went on and had that great run, great sort of end to Alan Shearer's career as well, helping Newcastle get into Europe, beating Sunderland 4-1 as well. And Nobby was part of all that. And thankfully, it helped Alan Shearer's career end on a bit of a high. I'm sure he would have loved to have capped it with silverware or maybe he's getting in the Champions League. But compared to what happened to that season, when it felt like we could possibly get relegated here, that was a great moment. And it was part of Nobby's sort of second coming at Newcastle.
It certainly was. And in terms of where you would list them, Lee, in the great Newcastle United wingers, so before our time, you've got the likes of Terry Hibbert, for example, or Tony Green's always spoken about really, really highly by fans who were lucky enough to watch them players. And then you go into the 80s and maybe, people might talk about potentially Chris Waddle on the flank. I mean, you correct me whether he played out on the left or a bit more centrally, but where does Solano rank in terms of the wingers that you've seen for Newcastle United?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably right. He's probably right at the top, really, for me. When you talk about that assist rate that he got, 78 assists, you can't put him anywhere but at the top for me. But he's right up there. I mean, obviously, I watched David Ginola, who could be a frustrating player. Could be a frustrating player in terms of you'd think he was going to put a cross in and he would cut inside. And as I said there, Alan Shearer got frustrated with him. So Ginola would be right up there. I think Keith Gillespie's another one who I enjoyed watching. I mean, he had the explosive pace, Keith Gillespie. No surprise that the season Newcastle nearly won the league, the 12-point advantage at the top disappearing coincided with Keith Gillespie getting injured. And again, another player that you get the chance to have a bit of a game with in charity games. And he's another one who's put a couple of goals on a plate for me in a game like that. You just have to arrive on the line and tap it in, really. But Keith Gillespie was right up there as well. And it was just such a shame that Newcastle didn't win something with him in the team. And, one of them where, you look at the crossing ability, I think for Gillespie in that Barcelona game, it was fantastic. But for me, the very top probably would be Nobby Solano in terms of that assist rate and the goals and everything else he brought to the table.
And if you're Anthony Gordon, perhaps, or Harvey Barnes, and you're looking around at wingers to emulate at Newcastle United, I mean, neither are in the breadth of Nolberto Solano at this time. But you look at Anthony Gordon; he's got the best years ahead of him, and he's doing really well this season. So in time, if he keeps working hard and things keep going for him, he may well be mentioned in the same breath. But I suppose it is the likes of Nolberto Solano that those wingers have to look to and think, that's where I want to reach. I want to be that level at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of, you go back to the technical ability, and that's what he had. But in terms of numbers, in terms of records and statistics, it's not a bad tally to have. And if anyone can get anywhere near that, then they've done unbelievably well. But yeah, you just hope that, the fact that he's been named in the Hall of Fame at Newcastle, that's a great accolade. It's a great recognition for him. It's something that may not have happened under previous owners, but for him to get that, I was delighted to hear that news.
Yeah, indeed, and he is kind of back involved with the club. He's on the kind of after dinner circuit. But do you think maybe there'll be a chance at some point that he gets maybe a coach role or something like that? Do you think he deserves to maybe go to the on-field kind of side of things?
Well, I think he's already done various jobs. Obviously, did a brilliant job with Peru. I think he was at Universitario in Peru as well, where he was dealing with a very small budget, young lads. He did a very good job with them as well. So I think if an opportunity came up for him at Newcastle, then you wouldn't get a better club icon to bring in. But it wouldn't just be about that. It would be about the fact that he's also a very good coach as well. It's not just because he's had a good playing career at Newcastle, because sometimes that doesn't sort of transfer. But I think for me, the fact he's already a very good coach, deep thinker, has a philosophy, has a really deep knowledge of South American players. You'd almost be buying an encyclopedia of South American footballers if you brought Nolberto Solano on the staff. I'm surprised it hasn't happened in the past. But again, it's about timing your run, and sometimes the opportunity isn't available. So you have to wait and see if he can, one day get on the coaching staff. I know Eddie Howe regards him very highly. He had him down to do a chat with the players last season. They put all his highlights on a big screen in front of all the first team players, and the likes of Dan Burn and Paul Dummett were obviously, delighted to be in the same room as him. So he's got the presence, and he's got all the ability to do it. So yeah, good luck to him. Hope something can come his way.
Yeah, maybe one to watch. And just to sign off then, Lee, how would you sum up Nolberto Solano's playing career at Newcastle United? If you were telling someone who wasn't really aware of how good he was, what would you say to them?
Oh, I mean, it's one of them where, we've got a lot of good players on the books at the minute, and we paid a lot of money for some top stars. But for me, I think you would put him up in the elite bracket of former Newcastle United players. Certainly, if you were compiling a top 20, he'd walk into that. He may even get in the top 15 or a top 10 of greatest all-time Newcastle United players. Obviously, we've had the great strikers, the great number 9s. We've had the great playmakers like Gascoigne. We've had your Rob Lees and David Batty's, but Nolberto Solano is a very, as I say, I keep saying the word technical. He epitomises that word because he's just so good on the ball, and the fact that Alan Shearer appreciated him so much, and all the players he played with under Sir Bobby Robson. I know he's still close mates with people like Laurent Robert and Ollie Bernard. They love him to bits, and there's a reason why, because he brings so much to the table.
Indeed. Well, this has been the first episode of In Conversation with Lee Ryder. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please hit like and subscribe through whichever platform you're joining us through. And me and Lee will be back next week. And from me and Lee, we'll see you guys very soon.